Okay, so this
So I'm going to read
is
you a little bit from The Secrets of Stillwater's Chasm, which is book 2, and the Oneida Harbor Mystery Series. So the setup, real quick, is my protagonist, Gabriella Dominici, is out on a lovely hike in the beautiful foothills of the Adirondack Mountains with Daniel Red Deer. And they are very much having a romantic day, and it's beautiful there. But of course, as you can imagine, since this is a murder mystery, things are going to get kind of interesting. The September sun rose above the trees and stood nearly at its apex. Gabriella paused to retrieve her water bottle from her backpack and took 4 long swallows. She offered it to Daniel, who drank deeply. When they'd had their fill, she replaced the bottle and reached for his hand to continue walking. She recited what she'd read the night before about this part of northern New York State, how during the most recent ice age, great glaciers had carved deep lakes and chasms and piled debris and earth into tall foothills. Just 30 miles from where they hiked rose the Adirondack Mountains, which contain some of the oldest rocks in the United States, more than 1 billion years old. Who knows? Maybe some of these stones too, she said, kicking one with the toe of her hiking boot shoes. Always the librarian, Daniel replied. Gabriella caught the deepening smile lines around his eyes. Guilty, but I like knowing stuff. And I like hearing it. The trail curved to the right, the trees parted, and Gabriella gasped at the first glimpse of the rocky walls of Stillwater's Chasm. Taking slow steps toward the edge, Gabriella peered over, expecting a sheer drop-off. Instead, the chasm walls sloped downward to the long, thin Stillwater's Lake, nearly 100 feet below. On the other side, rocks lay in horizontal bands like the layers of a cake, except where they heaved up, in some places nearly vertically. Gabriella scanned the rugged land stretching in all directions. Not one human-made structure could be seen. I see why you love it here. Daniel came up beside her and placed his hand gently on her back. It's one of my favorite places. They followed the curve of the lake, skirting a small marsh studded with cattails. Up ahead, the bleached hull of a tree trunk rested on the shoreline, and beside it was an upturned canoe, its deep green finish glistening in the sun. Gabriella looked behind them, wondering if they should walk in the other direction to preserve the illusion of being the only people here. But Daniel continued forward. On the other side of the tree trunk, hidden from sight until they reached the canoe, a man stretched out, face up, on the rocks. For an instant, Gabriella recalled Daniel reclining on the ground and wondered if this man might be sleeping. Then a faint gurgling noise grabbed her full attention. She dropped her backpack and rushed over to him. He looked to be about 30, dressed in jeans and a plaid shirt with a gray quilted vest. His body trembled stiffly, his arms and legs rigid against the stones along the shoreline. Help me roll him on his side, she ordered. Daniel grabbed the man by the shoulders, lifted him away from a puddle of vomit around his head. The man's body shuddered, then went limp. Gabriella began to detach, as if floating above the scene and watching herself attending to the man while Daniel waved his cell phone in the air and complained about getting a signal. Focus, she commanded herself, and recalled the first aid training she had received years ago and the refresher course she took periodically. Pressing her fingers into the man's neck, she felt for a pulse. Nothing, or perhaps just very faint. Her vision dimmed, narrowing to a tunnel. To stop it, Gabriella swept her gaze over the water, across the beach and the woods behind them. She saw another person lying there on the ground where the stony shoreline met the trees. Her consciousness slammed back into her body, and Gabriella took off, stumbling over rocks to reach a woman. At the sight of the gray face and half-opened eyes, Gabriella's perception blurred again, and she shook her head vigorously to clear her brain. Vomit, she noticed, rimmed the woman's mouth, and streaked her neatly plaited brown hair. She took note of the woman's jeans and red quilted vest over a long sleeve t-shirt. Gabriella tried to detect a pulse, but felt only cold flesh. The woman had been dead long enough for her body to cool. Turning back toward the beach, she saw Daniel splashing the man's face with water. "Come on, wake up," he yelled, piercing the swirl of fear. One thought whipped Gabriella into action. She had to save this man. Rushing over, she knelt beside his body and began rapid chest compressions to a count of 30, then breathed twice into his mouth. "Go get help," she told Daniel between breaths. "I'm not leaving you here," he said, "and I'm not leaving him. Then we're both staying."
Wow. That was wonderful. That was very, very good.